The Calling Out the Shots podcast is dedicated to compassionately looking for the truth in a world full of division and lies. Humanity has not been allowed to speak freely for so long, and so in efforts to begin the conversation, I, Dr. Ishwaran Kahilithas, will be speaking to the many who have been impacted over the last few years in order to bring back the art of listening so we can all begin to hear as one. Today's guest is HK Belvedere, an author and the person behind the Twitter account at HK Belvedere, an interesting account that delves deep into spirituality and shines a light on the dark entities that control global narratives. In previous times, HK's views may have seemed unrealistic, and may have landed him the label conspiracy theorist, but with what has been going on over the last 3 years, and with his theories unfortunately turning into reality, it has never been more important to have an open mind and listen to ideas that we once may have considered fringe. We speak about everything from the meaning of God to the process of waking up. I enjoyed our conversation a lot, though it was cut short due to technical difficulties. Thanks for coming on. You're one of the most interesting people on Twitter from the start. And I think recently there's been a movement with regards to this. It's become kind of fashionable to look into the depths of the dark web and the kind of Illuminati and all these things. It's kind of fashionable now after the pandemic, but I think you were one of the first ones who kind of opened my eyes and knew about all these things beforehand. So I wanted to kind of just speak to you really, and just have a conversation about anything really. This podcast is about mainly focused around the pandemic, and I think everyone's lives have been rocked and shaped in the last kind of 3 years. And longer, if you're counting the actual planning of the whole thing. But so I want to say that, yeah, it's super interesting. And also, you're one of the first people to actually support me on Twitter. So, I mean, thank you very much for doing that. I just wanted to say, for people who don't know you, I don't know if you can kind of summarize who you are or what your kind of Twitter is about.
Okay, well, I think what everybody learned from what you mentioned the past few years, what was going on, it's basically all connected to, you know, everything that I've written about on Twitter, wrote about, you know, that's why it's easy for me, because I can see how everything like that's interlinked, and then explain it in a way that people can understand it.
What kind of started your journey in actually kind of understanding the world?
It wasn't really like a defining moment. It was just like a gradual process, stumbling upon certain documentaries, certain books, you know, just connecting the dots, you know, just bit by bit over the years. It started in early 2009. That's when I started to become curious, and then it just sort of snowballed from that point. And then by the time 2020 came around, I'd already written a novel, and that's when I started to become more prominent on Twitter, because I was able to sort of articulate what was happening from, you know, the alternative point of view, rather than, you know, the mainstream one that everybody else get caught up in.
What I love about your work is that you're very grounded, because it can be, you can lose yourself, because we're kind of dealing with the unknown, right? So much kind of money and effort has been placed to keep things kind of hidden, and therefore information gets kind of wishy-washy, and people predict very different things, and it's very easy to have a strong opinion on one thing or the other. But you take a logical approach, from what I see anyway, in kind of dealing with these things. But also you have a spiritual, I don't even like the word kind of spiritual, but you have a deeper aspect or a deeper understanding than than most people that I've seen anyway online. Is that interlinked? Have you always been someone who's like, it seems like you always have been questioning, or you're a questioner. Is that kind of part of it? Have you turned kind of inwardly and also looked inside?
Without a doubt, but at one point in my life, I was, a normie. I was an NPC. I did believe in, the system, the matrix. I thought it was real, but I never snapped out it till that date that I mentioned earlier, like early 2009. That's when I was sort of snapped out it. So I was quite lucky to discover it that early, because then I was able to like go through everything in the process, and it's actually quite traumatic. When you wake up, it's not an easy road to go down, but it's one that I always felt eventually everybody's going to have to go down this road, so I might as well just get this over and done with early. And I guess I was quite lucky in regards to when 2020 came around. It was just timing. It was just perfect timing. Like, I set up a Twitter because I wrote a book purely. That's why I did it. I wasn't looking to grow on Twitter as quickly as I did, but I just caught a kind of a wave at the right place at the right time.
What kind of happened in 2009 in terms of the world? Was it the financial crisis and kind of all the wars taking place back then that kind of shook you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just at that point in my life, I just knew it was a turning point. It was a sort of Rosetta Stone moment where you go, right, maybe the world isn't the way I thought it was, and everything I've done's a lot of it was in vain, or it was under a false pretense of what the social contract was, what really drove this life, and everything that people go through, like the education and just everything, just the process that everyone goes through, like. But I wasn't a religious person back then. I was actually an atheist at one point, right up to my early 20s, really. So the spiritual stuff that came later. When I first woke up, I wasn't as articulate, and I was quite emotional about it. Like I was angry, and I would write about it. Like I did used to write about it on Facebook under my real name and stuff, and I was quite passionate about it. But because I was so emotional and it was scrappy, like I wasn't as good at writing. I had a bit of talent, but it was just kind of like a mess. It was just rants. I'd love to go back and read them because it's probably quite prolific considering what happened. But it would have been, at that time, people just thought like you're nuts. Because back then, like the system was, at least on the surface, it was stable. There was like things happening, like you mentioned, the financial crisis, and there was wars and all the other stuff. But on the surface, especially if you lived in the UK or America or like the West, like the Commonwealth countries, like things were pretty good on the front. So it was harder to convince people then, but since 2020 onward, a lot of people were forced into that journey. And it's so much easier now to relate to a wider audience.
Yes.
Because like you said, it's now it's basically mainstream. Well, isn't it?
I think it's mainstream, but so there's a few points. I think I've been talking to people who've been kind of injured after the shots, and not only do they have to deal with the injury, but they also have to deal with this transition, which is sometimes you can see it's more painful because everyone you trusted, you cannot trust anymore. Like every conditioning, every propaganda that you didn't even know it was a form of conditioning or propaganda, whether directly or kind of indirectly, all in the last kind of 3 years, especially if you've been injured or known someone who has all been shattered. So you have to like wake up. You have to wake up to like a new world, a new you, and then have to deal with that and your own kind of physical health. And I'm deeply I feel kind of sorry for individuals who are waking up, but I also do feel there is a sense of liberation, and I think it's necessary to wake up, because it's kind of the only way, because the other way is you get lost in the waves and you drown unknowingly, or you can learn to swim and find like-minded individuals and find a way to, in my eyes, reform a new society on kind of better standards and morals. And I think once you've woken up, there's no real turn. I don't really like to use the term kind of woken up, but once you've had the kind of insight, you can't go back again. So I think, to have had that really early on, I think you must have been someone who's always been kind of observant, even in a small way maybe, and always look for or maybe always question things, and that's helped you, and obviously helped your kind of Twitter account. But your messaging and the way you can articulate yourself on Twitter is amazing. I always go, wow, how can he put those complex emotional feelings into a tweet, and you do it kind of perfectly. So yeah, I love that. But in terms of more people waking up now, I think people understanding the pharmaceutical side of things, and obviously you have other kind of groups of individuals in terms of nutrition and healthcare and maybe pollution and ecology. But do you think people will wake up to a greater, because I think there's an even deeper truth when you look, even when you go and unravel these kind of questions of why do people do this to us? Why do we live in a world like this? There's a deeper truth, and you can go even deeper. Do you think people, or mankind, will get to the stage where kind of enough people will kind of reach that?
I would like to think so, yeah. I definitely think more people will, enter this way of thinking, as things gradually intensify, just with what's happening and everything else. And I mean, who knows what's planned next? Like, so without a doubt, man, I think people are going to wake up more. Will it be enough in time? Well, that's a different question, but you would like to think, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, your kind of perceptions kind of shape your kind of reality anyway. So if we think yes, then hopefully we haven't. If not, we kind of stop ourselves. So you said you didn't believe in God when you were younger, and now obviously you're more spiritual. What are your kind of views on God and that that whole thing?
There definitely is a designer of this reality, this universe, these universes. So yeah, I do believe in God, and my own sense, I'm not fully subscribed to any of the established religions. So yeah, I don't know what that makes me. That makes me just a believer, I suppose. But I think all religions in certain elements are satanic. Not in whole, but the more brutal aspects of them. So for me, yeah, there definitely is a God, but what that looks like, I really don't know. I've probably had little glimpses of it in my life. I think I'm just blessed to be able to tune into that frequency, but I don't think if you ever felt that power in its entirety, I don't think you would be able to come back to this state of being. I think it'd be too overwhelming. So I don't truly believe you'll find that out until
you die.
I mean, I was the same as you. I was an atheist, but even though I think there was always like a deep question, because I was, always kind of questioning. And then, like you, I don't subscribe to any kind of organized religion, because I think you can't kind of organize the infinite, because once you do that, then you stop yourself from fully understanding what's actually going on. And also, I think different religions maybe fragment this massive thing, and they're all talking about the same thing but in different ways, maybe. But I think it might be important for me anyway to have become an atheist first, and then have no idea and no concept of the thing or God, and then have found something that some people might call God. And I think that might have been important, because if I was someone who was religious with no understanding or no deeper understanding, I would just have taken the word and not the actual meaning. Because as maybe you will say otherwise, you can't put down the feeling of those kind of instances where you think you might have felt that. There's no words that can describe it.
Well, other than absolute completion, bliss, harmony, just pure energy. Other than that, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to put it into a coherent sentence. But yeah, I got a little glimmer into that feeling, but I would take to try and second guess it. It's not a force that you want to fuck about with.
No.
Like, I don't know what that even means. Does that mean there is a hell, as in a lower realm, dimension? Quite possibly. And I don't want to be down there, so.
What you have a tweet that says Satanism is like the most kind of practiced. I'm really kind of butchering your main kind of tweet here, but what do you think the core reason behind the last couple of years and even more? Is it because a lot of people, when they come out, they think it's the money. They think the pharmaceutical kind of industries want money, and that's why all of this things have kind of happened. But I think obviously it's a lot more deeper than just money, because if it was just money, they could have done something else, not harmed children and not wanted people, not the devastation that's happening now. And then if it's not money, because money can be printed as well, you think about maybe power, right? So people obviously use money as leverage for power. But then even power, I think, to a certain extent, there's even more. I mean, do you think there's kind of genuine kind of evil in the world, more than just wanting money and power?
Oh yeah, without a doubt, yeah. It's not as simple as money and power. The core drive behind it, from what I've read and what I've seen, it's not human. You could call it satanic. They might not see themselves as satanic, but to me, and I think most people that aren't them, they would brand it as that. Yeah, it definitely is evil. The money part of it, yeah, that is important, and it's also a huge energy transfer. So money's always tied into this type of stuff, big pharma and governments, and just everything that's been coming out about certain corporations and things that have happened with their own staff. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned at the start that they wouldn't go about it by hurting children and something as evil as that. But that, see, when you really study it at its core, that is what it's all about. That is the main. I mean, I think they see children as close to the source as you can get, like the raw spirit. So when they hurt that, that's like a big affront to God.
Mm.
And that's really what drives it. So the fact that that's been done now more openly, it makes sense
Mm-hmm.
to me, and that's where people struggle. You know, everybody can fathom corruption. Everybody can fathom greed. You know, people just want to make money and get a job with Pfizer or whoever because it pays well. Great,
Mm.
but um, sadly, it's more twisty than that. Like that line that gets you to a ceiling,
Mm.
and then above that ceiling, that's where the really dark controllers operate.
Mm.
But only certain people, pass through that ceiling. Most of them just get like to a certain point, and because they're paid well, the further up you go, the higher paid you are, and then the further down you go, the lower paid you are. But it keeps everybody sort of in line to fulfil the will of what lies beyond that ceiling.
Mm. So, do you think there's like a system in place and kind of rituals and like the way it's kind of portrayed in the media, in the media and films, or do you think this darkness lies in everyone and the people who are more inclined to act on this darkness just come together? If you know what I mean, or is it both?
I think to a degree that happens, yeah, to a certain point. But I honestly think once you go past that ceiling again, I don't think they're like us. It's a totally diametrical opposite
Mm.
worldview.
Mm.
Like it is pure evil. It is they won't care about how many folk die or get injured or anything, or that won't even register. It
Mm.
won't be. To them, it's funny, that they enjoy it.
Mm.
That's where people struggle to fathom this stuff. They just can't morally accept how evil it is. They just can't think that someone else would do that.
Mm.
It's really
Yeah.
just a projection of their own innocence
Mm.
onto everyone, and it applies
Yeah.
to most people, but not
Mm.
the guys that we're referring to.
Mm. And in fact, they actually they use that. I can see they use our kind of innocence and our goodwill for their gain. I mean, yesterday I was thinking about how I went to the recent protest in London, and there was a mother on stage mourning her lost son who died after the vaccine, after the shot. And I was just thinking, we've let society come to a point where there's mothers kind of begging for justice outside the BBC because they lost their son, and the BBC didn't play this, and it's becoming normalized, which is I mean, hopefully it does become normalized to an extent where we just carry on, nothing happens. I think there will be a point where society can't take it anymore. I mean, I hope anyway, and we seek justice. But it feels like this degeneration of society, whether it's injuries and death or ungodly behaviors, just this confusion in ourselves and the world, um, health and mental health, everything just seems off kilter, and it's becoming, in my eyes, worse. I mean, do you think I mean, in my opinion, we're at a tipping point, and there's a path now, whether whether one can take a path of ignorance and just accept this as normal and just and continue this life as a normality, or woken up, or seen what's going on and kind of fight for change. Do you think that do you think it's going to get worse, or do you think we're near like this end now where I think it's the most kind of crazy it's going to be?
There's not many. I don't think there's I don't think there's a lot of scope for downward movement now. I think we're pretty close to the bottom, yeah.
Mm.
In terms of like just the moral degeneracy,
Mm.
obviously what's been going on with the healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
and even before that, just the sort of gradual demoralisation that's been going on since.
Mm.
See, to be honest, it's been going on since we were born. It's been going on since I was
Mm.
born, but obviously you don't really become aware of it till a certain point. So a lot of
Mm.
people are now at that point,
Mm.
thanks to what happened in the extreme psychological. I mean, I would have hated to have woken up in 2020 trying to
Mm.
juggle juggle all that at the one time. Like people must have been totally skull fucked, man.
Mm.
I remember when the lockdowns hit, and I was sitting thinking like, this is easy for me. Like I knew this was going to happen in some form. I never thought it would happen in my lifetime, but that was just wishful thinking. I thought,
Mm.
nah, well, it might happen when I'm 50, 60, whatever. I might see it towards my end years.
Mm.
But the fact that it happened so quick, that did shock me. But luckily, I was already like mentally prepared.
Mm.
Most people wouldn't have been, and then now they've become hyper
Yeah.
aware and distrustful of everything. And I think what's happened with this, the treatment, it's really going to shatter people's confidence in all medicine, pharmacies, everything. Like people are really going to be thinking more holistic.
Mm.
Diet, exercise. Like see if people just knew, like if you just ate once per day and walked 10 mile per day, like your health would be a lot better. Like people literally just eat constantly, snacking all the time, getting fatty liver, diabetes. Then you
Mm.
add in this COVID shit and long COVID and the vaccine and all the horrors that have came out of that and that are ongoing.
Mm.
Like this isn't over. Like, but you notice the government they stop boosters for under 50s. Does that mean you can't get this now if you're under 50? You can't get that jab. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's right for the UK anyway.
So out of the blue, they've just said if you're under 50, you don't need it.
Yeah.
After
Yeah.
giving it to people for 2.5 years,
Mm.
pretty much across the board,
Mm.
the damage has been done.
Yeah. I think my kind of wishful side and the side I'm always going to keep is basically what happened over the last few years was just an outgrowth of what was going to happen anyway. It was the human condition because we like to push things and people in power because of the system that's in place. Because after World War II and the way the industries were formed and how kind of money has been printed, that you're going to get it's just kind of corruption over corruption on corruption. So it's never going to become a utopia randomly, right? It's just going to get worse. And so you have and then it attracts more degeneracy and more corruption in the top, and that kind of filters down into society. But obviously, like any system, especially nature, there's always going to be a tipping point, and then a pushback. And I think what's happening was always going to happen. And I always think we might be living in the worst 100 years. If you look at it, if someone writes a book in the next 200 years, they might look at this 100 years that we're in now as one of the worst. That doesn't have to mean your life right now has to be bad, but as a population, as a globe. But I think it might be needed for enough people to wake up. So in different realms of society, so newer structures can be formed. So this doesn't happen again. Well, that's wishful thinking, because we've had World War II and so many millions of people being killed and the Nuremberg trials, and we've had so many other genocides, and nothing's changed, right? But I think what the difference is now is the government have hurt their own people, and so many people have been affected, and there was no actual outward kind of war. And I also do think it's been rushed. I think their kind of initial plan was to maybe do it, set the pandemic in around maybe after 2022, but due to other things, maybe they rushed it, and I think they were on the back foot. And I think you also have similar viewpoints. Maybe I'm wrong, but is that something that you also think, that they've kind of rushed it? And
yeah, without a doubt. The COVID, I think the overall COVID objectives were not met. It was a successful operation, and insofar as the compliance and the time that they got people to, just carry out ridiculous behaviour to a really like arbitrary and pedantic amount. But the whole point of that was ultimately to get everybody on a digital ID via the proxy COVID pass, which didn't work out pretty much anywhere. Like even places where it was implemented, even to enter a shop, for food. I think they've pretty much all been rolled back. It never really happened in the UK. It was sort of they had it for nightclubs, I think, at one point. Something stupid, but that was a big loss for them. Yeah, the vaccine passport was a key element of it. And was COVID rushed? Was it meant to happen a few years later? Quite possibly. I'm not so sure. Like maybe it was, but the initial operation was. I mean, the media really done well in the early stages, but now that goodwill and trust from the average normie, I think that's been diminished, massively, or completely destroyed, maybe in many people's cases. Same with like healthcare in general, and I think a lot of people now will be, they'll be cynical about you just got to a doctor, let alone a hospital. But you really need to assess your healthcare decisions now. Like it's crazy. It's crazy what's happened. It's went from almost universal trust to, there's probably a minority, a 10-20% of people that, still would blindly trust the government, the NHS, the narrative. There's always going to be that staunch section that are like fringe, NPC, would wear a mask again, on demand for the next pandemic or whatever. But I think on the other hand, there's a much bigger spectrum of people that are going to question and resist from, the get-go next time. I'd like to think so anyway.
Yeah, me too. The problem I face is, like, even though some people don't believe in any of the government or healthcare, they're still fearful, so they will still put a mask on if told to. But they will still, just kind of follow the rules kind of blindly if told to. I think a lot of people during the pandemic, that's what they did, but they did it out of fear and trust. But now the trust is gone, and I still do think a good chunk of the population will still carry on the rules, even half the rules, because of fear. And yeah, you will always have the kind of staunch, where 10 or 15% of people who will always kind of follow the rules. But I mean, during our protests in London, we had a lot of support from just random people on the street, kind of taxi drivers, kind of saying kind of well done, people reading, the all the signs and stuff. But there was, I remember one person kind of shouting and saying how deluded we were, and how stupid we were. And it's just like, it's actually scary how deep the conditioning goes. Like it was scary to see it in healthcare and my colleagues, and then asking them questions. I'm like, can't you see it just makes no sense. Like, taking a mask off in the staff room, but wearing the mask when seeing patients. I'm like, we're living a lie, right? And asking them, and they just kind of parrot off answers that's giving them, kind of policy answers. I'm like, wow, it's like you're talking to robots or something. And I used to be kind of angry because, these people, because they don't really see it, but now I just feel kind of sorry for them because they're so stuck in this narrative. Do you think there's a way to, firstly, do you think everyone can wake up or see the truth? And secondly, do you think, and how would you, let's say you have a parent or a friend who still opposes this and thinks you're crazy. Do you think there's a way? There's like, is there a kind of approach that you can use with a person like this?
Well, first of all, I think everyone has the potential to wake up, but for that die-hard 20% of people that I mentioned, it's going to take extreme turmoil in their own personal life before they get angry enough to see it for what it is. But as for trying to convince people and stuff, it's much harder in people in your own life, your family, parents, older brothers, sisters. Like, it doesn't really matter who you are or what you've done or how often you've been right. They always see you as a junior. No, they don't want you educating them about a complex issue.
Mm.
They will have to wake up eventually. That's what I take comfort from. They'll either do it off their own back, or they'll do it in response to it affecting their own personal life, which eventually will come, which already has came, hasn't it? It's already happened, but in the future that is highly likely to be done again or even intensified, in my opinion, without a doubt. So maybe then they'll wake up.
Mm. It's like I still see, like, even now, because there's different forms of conditioning, right? So the people and family and friends who I warned at the start, I work frontline, and like the amount of research I've done on this is, every day for a year. No, maybe, I mean, for 3 years, and then every day for a year for this book and stuff. But as you said, they don't see me as an authoritative figure. They don't see me as authority. So they wouldn't listen. So the actual conditioning is the authority conditioning, not the information. It's who it's from, right? So that in itself is a form of conditioning, which is, from school, from a young kid, being parent, being told what to do and stuff, which is fair. But some people are not listening to the news, and that's changing. But I still see people still only listening to, the top scientists or experts, or you know individuals with a name or a title, even though these people are usually very late into the game, and many other people who are very independent, or kind of who don't have a voice or a name, have said this for a while now. But only when this information gets to the mainstream do the people start listening. And unfortunately, by that time, you're more unwell. And I think, for me, that's a form of conditioning that needs to be looked at a deeper sense. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, that is true. The argument of authority is powerful, and
Mm,
that's why the media is there. That's why the BBC is
mm,
there. I mean, these companies, they're probably not even profitable.
mm,
They will probably cost more than what they bring in. So their purpose is to create perceptions, official perceptions, And when it comes to big kings, they will refer to that by default. And like you said, that is now not a wise thing to do. It's actually very dangerous. Whereas, back in the 90s and even the early 2000s and up to like 2010 or whatever, maybe it was beneficial just to, go along to get along. The system back then, it was still evil at its core, but not in such a prominent manifestation as it is today. Like, it's always been evil, but it would deny it was evil. Now they're showing you that they really are evil. And they really just gaslight. That is what the media do. They really they use repetition, base level fear. That's what puts people into that sort of animalistic emotional state, especially women. Women are on average probably more susceptible to it than men, but men these days are so demoralised and lacking in testosterone and poor diet. It's just everything else. It's really like a full spectrum attack. You could never have had lockdowns in the UK in the 1960s for any bug. No telling guys they can't go out or whatever. It just wouldn't have worked, would it? Because people would have walked outside and spoke to their neighbour and were like, "Nah, this is a lot of crap. Like, we don't need to."
Yeah. But I also do think it wouldn't have happened in the 1960s because the technology wasn't there for a mass scale. I mean, there's no internet, right? There's no there wasn't TV. So as we've become more interconnected, we've also the level of control has also increased. So in the 60s, we didn't have. I mean, I wasn't there, but they didn't have the level of kind of state control on all. They're very. I mean, they weren't good, but they didn't have this much control as they're now. And as you're right in saying, it's a multi-system attack, and I think they seek to fragment the family unit and everything that it is to be a kind of happy, strong, and confident being.
Yeah.
And when that happens, then we inherently seek help or seek the truth or seek the next best thing that can help us. And then they kind of step in and go, well, here you go. This is the food and we will help you. And so it's like they give us the problem and they also give us their solution.
Yeah. That is the whole Luciferian doctrine right there. It's problem, reaction, solution. We will create the problem. This will get the reaction, and we will then come in posing as the savior with the solution. That is the essence of everything, and that's what the average person can't get. They just can't fathom how twisted that is. But I mean, that is what it is.
It is, isn't it? And it's a tactic they've been using for a long time. They kind of introduced guns in Jamaica, so the kind of CIA did that, and then afterwards, because they wanted to gain control of the country, they would, they start wars or famines in different countries in Africa and around the world, like kind of Congo.
Oh yeah.
As Congo always has kind of Ebola because they have gold.
Yeah.
There's a reason why these places have problems because there's something else to gain. But people just, it's so. I mean, I have family who've come from the genocide, and I used to work. I've worked abroad in kind of genocidal, like in Cambodia. So I've always known the tactic, but when it happened here, I was like, wow, this is really, they really planned this out and used so many tactics that I'm like, I did not think it would happen ever, let alone in my generation. And what I realized was everything they did, from like discounting a natural immunity, just like a basic concept, a thing that we've learned in medical school, but let alone human beings have, and every organism on the planet is able to fend off an infection. If they're healthy, you could fend off infection forever. If you're, if not,
Yeah.
all animals wouldn't be here. But they just
Correct.
discounted that. They just didn't even talk about it. They didn't even see it as a thing. A, obviously to kind of sell their product, but also B, because natural immunity is godly. It's self sovereignty, it's power, and understanding the infiniteness in you and the power that kind of resides in you, and also understanding that you are nature and nature is you. But obviously they didn't want any of that, because that would break the whole concept of going away from that, causing trauma. So then we'll have to look for answers. But yeah, that was when you began tweeting these things, I was like, oh my god, this is exactly the tactic. And I think on deeper reflection and meditation, they've done this with regards to everything, not just health.
Oh yeah. Yep.
It goes so deep.
It's so obvious. It's not obvious. That is the whole. It's just a big confidence mind game. It's a trick, like you were mentioning about natural immunity. That when you catch anything, you get antibodies in the mucus behind your fucking nose and your throat. You don't get that with any vaccine, and that makes sense, because that's where these viruses would enter the system most likely, isn't it? Through the nose or through the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
It's just basics, man. Like I had COVID in November 21 for a couple of days, and since then I have not had one sniffle, one sore throat, never fucking anything. Like I think I think I got an early version of it, and it just gave me pure super immunity. But I take a lot of zinc and silver and all sorts of mad shit, so maybe that helps or not. But I would have hate to took that jab. Look, it never even crossed my mind. I just knew. I knew by the marketing, the evil marketing. It was just every day on the radio: get vaccinated, get vaccinated. Every sign, get vaccinated. That is just pure mind control, repetition. And then on top of that, you had the social pressure. That vibe. Like, oh, you had your jab yet? Oh, but nobody wanted to be the weirdo. Like, really, it was palpably demonic.
Yeah. It was a communist, and it still is. It was a regime, to clap for the NHS. I worked front line, and I told my family, we're not going to clap for the NHS, because even if the NHS isn't did the best job in the world, we pay taxes for it. This is not like we shouldn't turn into a culture or a religion or a temple. When people start to form a group and it turns into like a cult. And when that happens, it's very dangerous, because then you can't go against the cult. Even if you want to try and improve it, people will see you as someone who's going against it.
Yeah.
It should be an independent association that you needs to be regularly checked upon and kind of improved. But instead, it turned into this game. It was very weird. It was just to be alive and see the things that are happening with an objective, mind, was just mind-boggling. I was like, how is no one questioning any of this?
Oh man, it was relentless military grade psychological warfare. From the word go. I thought at one point, I went, they're never going to give this up now. I'm actually shocked it did come to an end when it did. I was surprised at that. I thought, this will probably just keep going, but I think they maybe just pushed a little too far too soon, and people just went, nah. It was just too much, man.
I think, especially in this country, the leaders got a bit greedy and carried away. So obviously, the kind of public affairs and Boris Johnson being Boris Johnson, those who didn't like him, regardless of the policies, didn't with this party scandals, they kind of had enough, even though some of these people still wanted mask mandates and things like this. His bumbling, and he kind of fumbled the bag, really. I think him and his team, to our kind of it actually helped us. And I also think in the UK we had people in the media and in the scientific community who actually spoke up, and actually helped us. We didn't, we had a lot of people who didn't, but I think technology, Twitter, people kind of speaking up, and then also leaders who wanted more of the cake, they kind of fumbled the bag. And after one country goes down, the kind of others and other people go, well, hold on, wait, the virus can't be different here and there, right? But yeah, at one point I felt, am I gonna live in a world like this forever? It was truly, it just feels like a dream now, looking back.
Yeah, you live through a massive psyop. Don't underplay it by like any means, and it might happen again. It might not. I would say it's highly likely to happen again in the future. When, I'm not sure exactly, but I can only guess. When it does come around, it will be notched up a bit in severity. The whole scenario and the reaction to it and stuff. But who knows? Maybe that whole method of control. Maybe they've fucked it with COVID. Maybe now that's like that's a direction they might not wish to pursue. But it was pretty effective for a while. It just didn't reach the objectives that they wanted. But these people are fucking nuts, man. Like that's what you need to remember about like the whole New World Order and the globalists and the bankers and all these bloodline interests and families and all the lackeys and everything that goes with it. Like they are pretty crazy. Like they're pretty destructive people. So they're unpredictable, and I think the more people shine a light on them, they become more and more volatile. That's maybe why you're seeing what you're seeing in Russia and Ukraine, and I've seen Israel attacked Iran yesterday. Kind of randomly. Just seems a bit weird. So it's interesting things, man. It's a mad thing to be alive. We are going through a fucking mad transition, and I don't think there's been any point in human history where as many people have been awake at the one time.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel there is more of an interconnectedness, and I also might be projecting my own reality on people and the world, but obviously there are people who are never going to get any of this and will label us with with names and words, whatever. But I think the last couple of years have really filtered out people, and really filtered out people, because you can go back to people's history and see whether they supported mandates, whether they didn't, whether if you're a doctor or a kind of a coach and you wanted people to take the jab or not, and whether you were like people like Sam Harris and other kind of intellects or so-called intellects who are now doing who are now kind of dancing around the idea of maybe it was right and wrong, but at the time they were very for everything. So it kind of revealed the kind of deepest sense of each kind of individual. And I understood the people on Twitter who I was kind of following. Okay, I can trust this person now. Or not even on Twitter, even my friends and family. I'm like, okay, if something goes down, this person I'm not too sure, but this person, yes. And I'm finding myself kind of connected with people who are more like-minded, and more than the mind, who just want a better world and understand that we need to come together and work together. And I think the last few years has just kind of filtered that out. Is that something that you've been seeing, and have people come up to you?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think the past few years there's been an explosion of new people finding like-minded people, sharing these ideas. I mean, compared to even like 5 year ago, let alone 10 year ago, it's much easier now to be understood.
Mm.
Um, in this worldview that people like me and you hold.
Mm.
It's pretty scary at the same time, because it's one thing learning about theories and potential scenarios and stuff, but when you actually start living it, it's different.
Mm.
At a certain point, conspiracies or different viewpoints or whatever, geopolitics, just everything, really, everything that you can feed your mind at a certain point, it just becomes another form of entertainment.
Mm.
No different to like a soap opera or a movie or listening to music. But
Mm.
once these things really start happening, yeah, and you realise, you go, no, I had to learn that, that was important. This is real. This is the
Mm.
real world.
Mm. I think the problem now, I think what will happen is it will start to get quite meta. And what I mean by that is the psyops itself and the awakening from the psyops will be used as a psyops. So it'll become very confusing if, especially if you don't have a stable kind of place to go to or thought processes. It's very easy to get kind of swayed, and actually the people in power aren't stupid. They are they work together, and they know, and they have an agenda, and a plan. And obviously, if they understand that we're kind of catching on, and they probably already have, and that was probably in their plan already, then they might even use this, people awakening to itself form another form of kind of psyops. So it goes even deeper and even more confusing. Is there a way to fully understand this, or do you think will always be confusion?
Yeah, there'll always be an element of confusion. There'll always be a psyop on top of the psyop on top of the psyop, and it's like a judo move. When somebody hits you in judo, then you follow through with a defense. It's all weird alchemy. Yeah, there will always be psyops now, but I think the general baseline level of awareness and recognition of a psyop and its earliest expression, that's much higher now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to become tougher to psyop people in the manner that they have been in previous years and decades.
Mm-hmm.
I think things will get more insane, but it'll be like a chart. Basically, you've got one side going up, but the other bit going up as well. There'll be a greater awakening with the greater intensity of events.
Mm.
So it's exciting times, man. It's a good time to be alive.
No, yeah, it is a very good time to be alive. I think, yeah, it's just the amount of change. I mean, if you objectively just take yourself back to 2009, but you had your phone from
Yeah,
now, and you went on Instagram or TikTok or even Twitter, and you scrolled, I would have been shocked. I'm like, what? Like that? It's so
yeah.
normal.
Oh, without a doubt. Oh, crazy. I would never have believed you. Even 2020. Even if you told me in 2020 what had happened between then and now, I would have went, nah, no way. That's too much. Like,
Hmm.
if you look through history, there's periods of hundreds of years where nothing really happens, and then there's like a mad fucking decade
Hmm.
where there's world wars and pandemics and all sorts of crazy shit. So we are just in like a very volatile period in history.
Hmm. Like,
But it does feel sort of calm, there is a calmness, but just with everything that's going on, like I'm always kind of on edge by default,
hmm.
like naturally paranoid about everything. So I just hope for the best, and it's all in God's hands anyway. It's God's world, God's plan, God's will, God's desire, God's creation.
Yeah. That's We can't. We can do everything. I mean, we should do everything we can, but at the end of the day, it is God's world. It's God's universe, and whether I think it's even deeper than just a man in the sky. I think it's infinitely complex, and we'll never understand it, but or understand it fully. But like even things like Kanye West, and he's always been very flamboyant, let's say, with his words, but his recent interviews and things like that, if you told me that he would have said those kind of things 2 years ago, I would be like, no. But it's just being normalized. It's just being like, wow, okay, these people, the extreme on both ends are being normalized, as you said. But I want to ask you, even though this is happening and the internet is becoming a lot more wild, it does seem like there's a fort, or there's like a fortress around leaders of the world, let's say, with the media kind of acting like a mort, and we can see them doing all these bad things, but we have no power. Everyone's shouting and screaming, and people are being unwell and injured, but it just seems that we're very kind of helpless. Like, they will just talk about global warming and climate change, and they'll go on their planes and jets, and people will kind of whine about it and talk about it on the news, on social media, but nothing changes. They still go on their planes. Do you think we need to do more? And if so, what is that step?
At that point, it just becomes about you being not being too humble to be a leader. Like, be willing to be the guy that says the difficult things, and it's not an easy path. Like, there's a lot more resistance when you're in this sort of mind frame. There's always going to be a lot more pushing back against you, and then obviously you've got the overriding kind of big brother. This is how it is. Hands, face, space. See, when you speak to people like children, it puts them in a sort of childlike mode. I don't really know what to do, other than all I can do is really just write what I feel. That's what I'm good at. As for how to actually defeat the system, I don't think you can defeat it. I just think you need to resist it enough until it collapses on its own. Because that's the thing about evil. Like, at a simple level, it's really calculated and it's all planned out, exact long-term strategies, logic. But I'm starting to think, like, right at its core, it's just like a cancer. It just keeps eating and eating and eating and eating away, and eventually it will eat itself, and it will destroy itself from within. I'd like to think that's what would happen, but obviously humanity's got to, like, keep putting it under pressure like we have been. I don't think there'll be a point where we overturn evil. Like, there'll always be evil. To an extent, it'll always find a vacuum, and it'll start to grow again. But once it gets to a certain point, that's when you need to kind of like clip the wings, so it dies down again. But it will never actually disappear. There is no end point in the battle. The battle between good and evil is, in my opinion, eternal.
Yeah, I mean, that's. I always ask people, like, what's the next step? Like, think like 9 steps in the future. What are your grandchildren going to be doing? Because it's very simple, easy to get lost right now and be like, oh, we have to, like, stop kind of government controlled, kind of centralized currency and vaccine passports and all that kind of thing. But there's going to be more. There's going to be more kind of evil. These people don't go like, okay, we're done now, we're going to take the rest of our time off. there's always going to be evil. Like you said, there's always going to be people who want power and who want to harm. And we always need to we have to resist, because if not, then the human race won't exist for very long, I think, because it's just ruining the systems. I think the world will survive, but we won't. And I personally don't even think God cares. I think it's so infinite that, and we've got all the answers already, and we're just kind of playing this game, and we've always kind of playing this game. But if we don't resist or find the truth, more of us don't find this truth, then we won't exist. I don't know when, but eventually it'll come sooner than later. Everything that we build and everything that we stand for and the whole of human existence will crumble. Yeah, but it's a shame. For me, I think evil can be resisted, but I think it needs constant. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe evil can't be fully beaten in most people, but I think once you've seen a higher light, then then the evil really goes down, and you don't see it anymore.
Yeah, for evil to be effective, it has to convince you that you are lower than it.
Yes.
That is how this world operates. It's all really very vindictive. It's all about making people feel like they don't deserve to be good. Most people self-sabotage. That is the basic programming of the whole Matrix New World Order. It's about making people scared to subconsciously believe that there's a higher power than them. When there is that is what I've found is the essence of it. Life is just really a big confidence game. So the more confident you are, the more you can bend reality in your will, basically.
Yeah, because you're tapping into that power source, aren't you? Because because we're talking about not kind of pretend confidence, but actual deep understanding of the infiniteness that is in you, the kind of cosmic kind of energy within each individual. That level of confidence, when you understand how powerful you are, and you see it around you when you walk in the forest, or you see different animals have that same energy, then that's the energy that they use to run their system. That's the energy that they want to run that monster. So they always want to kind of dumb you down and take that away from you, zap it away from you.
They want a dense waveform from everyone in that collective mass of density. They somehow feed from that. I don't know how it works other than that. It is just a theory, but all in all, I think that's pretty likely to be the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that way. Everything, even from the fluoride in our tap water, right? It's byproduct of pesticides.
Is fluoride in UK tap water now?
Yeah, and they're trying to increase it as well.
For what I remember, it was never in Scottish water. I remember I checked years ago.
It might not be in Scottish, but
I don't think
pretty sure it's in English.
That's pretty bad.
That might kind of explain why the Scots are a lot more brave, and a lot more, not even brave, just a lot more truthful, a lot more close. The Scots I've been speaking to recently have been the one who've been speaking out, and they speak out for their fellow man. So it's like they're more kind of aligned with themselves. And I think the Scots just tell the truth, and it might be because you have kind of warrior blood in you, from past history. But it's very refreshing to hear and see. And it might be the fluoride. But yeah, everything. I always tell people, like, if the government really cared about your health, there would not be like a McDonald's at every corner, like in your town. That's just a simple fact. But yeah, we're just so conditioned to think that they do, and healthcare is such, this thing. Well, I was wondering, are your family and friends like you, or have you had friction with some of them in the last kind of 3 years or so?
No, they're not. They're not like me. My family aren't anything like me. I'm what you would call a black sheep. Um, no, there wasn't much friction because I've always been very opinionated
Mm,
about things and very distrustful. So, like, they knew I wasn't going to accept what was being said, or take the treatment that was offered to said solution.
mm,
I'm not quite as persuasive in real life as
mm,
I am on Twitter. Sadly,
mm.
that's maybe something that I should work on. But I've always been like the sort of tinfoil guy, like for a long time, like way before COVID.
Mm,
So it never caused any friction.
mm,
I think now, I mean, even academically and scientifically, I think I've won the argument though.
mm. Yeah, yeah.
Certainly in
I
terms of the
mean,
vaccine, without a doubt, like the people that didn't take the vaccine, they are clear winners.
yeah.
And if you want to make it a debate, it's not a debate. It's deeper than a debate. But if you want to make it a purely, you know, a debate issue, then yeah, we won. Well done. But in the end, we didn't really win, did we?
No, no,
It's not a victory in the overall picture.
no. Yeah.
But nah, like
I mean,
most people that I know in real life, there's never been any friction about it. Maybe if I'd just woken up and I was angry and stuff, and I was really kind of trying to ram it down their throat, maybe.
mm,
But nah,
I think, yeah, I'm the same in real life. I wish I was more convincing, but I don't think it might be us, but I also do think people either want to be convinced or not.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, you can tell two people the same thing, or someone will take it on board and be open to change, and someone will just not. And they might nod and say they will, but they just won't.
yeah,
And on Twitter, there is a bubble. Obviously, there's people who just understand our kind of points of view, and so um, they kind of see. And also, Twitter, there's more than one opinion on the same thing. So if you're on the fence, then you can change. You might think and be like, okay, I might not do this because there's more than one person saying it. But like, even after releasing my book and talking to friends and family, they would ask me about um, how I wrote the book and how long it took, but nothing about the book, which I found very interesting on reflection after this, because it's like, this is the greatest crisis in mankind's history, and we've been lied to at such an epic proportion, and it's all in here. And I can tell you now if you want. I can share everything I know, but there's this obstacle in a lot of people that just do not. They just, even now, even with the news and more papers coming out, it's only going to get worse. In the next year or so, in the next 50 years, you're not going to get new evidence saying it was all false and it's all fine. It's only going to get worse, right?
yeah,
But,
yeah,
it's like there's a stop or like an obstacle in them that they just don't want to hear it. And I can see why, because it will just crumble everything. It will just totally destroy the whole concept, the whole world view concept of every single thing. Because especially with the last kind of 3 years, it's affected all areas of life. That if you see one lie and you understand it, then everything will fall down like a domino, and it will just continue. So, like, I do see why, but there's a part of me that goes like, if if you don't understand it, it's going to kill you. You know, if you don't, because you can look after you know, yes, we might not be able to remove the spike, you know, at the moment, but there's things you can do to improve your health. There's other aspects of your life that you can improve, but yeah, it's just like these people just do not want to hear it. And that's probably something you might have faced all your life then.
I wouldn't say all my life, but certainly the past 10, 15 years, yeah. But now it's not a case of they don't want to hear it because it might, just affect their worldview on an emotional level. Now, now they are going to have to deal with it, maybe physically. Because, like you said, as these things are being pumped out in the body, each year goes by, immune system gets a little weaker. All it's going to take is a really bad flu or whatever, and they could be in trouble. And that's before you think about the heart effects, the spike proteins, the autoimmune issues attacking your own organs, basically. What else is there? The mitochondria storms and stuff that happens with all the DNA splicing. That happens later. So there's going to be people getting all sorts of weird syndromes, and heart issues are obviously a prominent thing already. And that's not going to go away with time. That's going to increase.
Yeah.
So
heart issues.
Yeah, big time. I mean, you can't live without a healthy heart for long. Like if you get what's it called? Myocarditis.
Yeah.
No, they throw that around like, oh yeah, it's mild. It's not mild. It's heart tissue scarring. No, if you get that at 15, you're going to be very lucky to hit fucking 30 or 40. I mean, am I right? That's true, isn't it? I mean, if you get diagnosed with that and you're a young guy or a young woman, you ain't going to live that long, no matter what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, depends on the kind of severity and whatever, but the mortality rates aren't good for bad myocarditis, especially if they're scarring. But even regardless, I mean, there's high risk of dementia, high risk of cancer, high risk of infertility, high risk of HIV-like syndrome, high risk of prion disease, and it all feeds on each other, because then you're more likely to get other infectious diseases. So if there is another pandemic, then you're more likely to become unwell. So there's this like loop, continuous loop, and a reliant on big pharma. And